Hello everyone, welcome to Thursday, and if it's Thursday that means that we're doing a webinar. I am Chris Irons, Australia Advisor with Hines Legal, former Commissioner. With me and back this week after a brief time away, Frank Higginson, partner. Frank, welcome back.
Hello everyone, I'm feeling very threatened by Miles and Chris's performance last week, so I'd better perform today, otherwise I'm obsolete.
Yeah, no, Miles did a stellar job last week, but I'm sure you'll slot back in nicely. As always, don't forget to like and share, everybody. Get it around, get some topics out there, get some engagement with the topics. Today, we are actually doing one of our sequels. So we've done a couple of sequels and a couple of topics of late. As it turns out, today we're doing Body Corporate Managers Part 2. The reason why, I think, Frank, that webinar we did on Body Corporate Managers, apart from the legislation one, which was a one-off special, that Body Corporate Manager one has had the most interest thus far. I mean, do we think that that's because body corporate managers are not well known about what they do, or is it because they hold such an important role, or a bit of both? What do you reckon?
Oh, definitely a bit of both. Like, I don't think, and this is one of the issues for the strata management industry, is no one comes out of school or goes into school and finishes grade 12 wanting to be a body corporate manager, as a rule. Sort of not a natural career path. So not many people know what they do. And mate, to me, it is also one of the reasons we're doing these webinars, is to help people understand what goes on in what is otherwise a very opaque sector of the community. You know, there's 500,000 strata schemes in Queensland, let alone around Australia. But these body corporate manager things we're talking about today, by and large, are applicable across Australia. So, you know, people know what lawyers do, I think. They probably don't know what commissioners do, and a lot of people don't know.
No, but no, you're right, and that's kind of what we've structured today around in this part 2. We're going to actually bust a few myths about body corporate managers. There's misunderstandings, misperceptions, ideas about body corporate managers. We're just going to bust a few myths today about body corporate managers, and then after that we're going to kick into, okay, so if we have busted those myths, what's the realities? What does a body corporate manager actually do, and where does that leave you? And then right at the end, if there are problems, and sometimes problems happen, if there are problems, what do we do about it? How do we address it in the best possible way? First of all, those myths, Frank. I'm going to kick it off. So myth number 1, the body corporate manager responds to all correspondence. No, that's not their job. Body corporate manager is not a secretary. A body corporate manager receives your correspondence if you're an owner, for sure, but their job is to not give you a response to that. Typically, it's the job of the committee to respond, particularly if you have a request or a motion. What the body corporate manager might do is have one of those automated responses which says, thanks for your email, we will deal with that and come back to you in due course. That's not their job though, replying to correspondence. Over to you, Frank, number 2.
Yeah, and really the next point sort of flows on from that. It's like, so a body corporate manager is not a decision maker for a body corporate. So in Queensland, legally, a body corporate is prevented at law from delegating decision making to third parties. It's the committee that must do that. And in that sense, a body corporate manager is the same as what we are for clients. You know, so if we have someone self-represented or another lawyer write to us on behalf of their client, we're acting for someone, it's not for us to go back and say, oh, no, our client's going to do this. They get instructions. And that is exactly the same in relation to any request, because Chris was talking about before. Take pets. I'm making an application to keep a pet. I want to keep that pet. It's not the body corporate manager that makes the decision to approve or deny that. It's the committee.
That's right.
So, it's in this, I suppose, this nebulous mass that is the strata community. A lot of body corporate managers do get pinned with, you made this decision, and it's actually not them making it. They're acting on instructions the same as we would if we're acting for a client, because the body's corporates are their clients.
That's right. That's right. The next myth, my turn. The body corporate manager controls body corporate funds. No, they don't. They are a signatory to the account. Absolutely. They're involved financially in terms of managing the finances. Absolutely. But it's not the body corporate manager's money. They don't hoard the money. A number of times I have heard owners say to body corporate managers, you've got my money, you're controlling. No, that's not the case. They're a signatory to the body corporate funds.
Yeah, Frank. And the same thing, I suppose, you're back to decision-making. Bylaws are one of the big things that blow up all the time in bodies corporate. And normally, the only person or the only entity that can actually enforce bylaws is the body corporate committee. But inevitably, that's not going to be the committee knocking on someone's door. That's going to be a bylaw breach notice, warning notice, nasty letter from the body corporate management company on behalf of the body corporate. And people lose that distinction all the time. Again, it's not the body corporate manager that is actually physically saying to you, you can't do it. It's the committee doing what they're actually required to do at law with respect to enforcing the bylaws. That's
right. My term, the body corporate manager does not approve maintenance or does not attend to maintenance. So again, owners bringing the body corporate manager and demanding that the guttering be fixed, for example. That's not the body corporate manager's job. It's the job of the committee acting on behalf of the body corporate to maintain common property. The body corporate manager is involved perhaps in getting a contractor to provide quotes, absolutely. But it's not the body corporate manager's job to get out there on site and fix a problem or approve maintenance or do the work. That's the job of the committee.
Yeah.
Frank.
Yeah, and the next one really is the body corporate manager controls the committee. That we get that a lot. So, and look, don't get me wrong, the same as if we give advice to clients, by and large, it'll be followed. Occasionally it won't be, and that's okay. We're not the ultimate people that are going to be accountable for that decision. So if people choose to go a different way from the advice they've been given, then so be it. But the body corporate manager, they'll certainly influence a committee, and the right one will guide a committee in the right way, but they don't control committees. And really, for me, the way it works is the body corporate manager's ideal role is to be as impartial as possible and not get emotionally involved with committee members, which might be particular vendettas, because inevitably in these things, and this is, large part of our practice is ideally resolving disputes or dealing with disputes. There's two sides. The body corporate manager tries to stay in the middle and guide people rather than, get after them and sort that out. You should really go after them in the commissioner's office and all that sort of stuff. They don't do that, or a good one certainly won't. So they don't control committees as much as people think they do.
Yeah, my turn. The body corporate manager is not the caretaker, and vice versa. They're two distinct things, and I often hear and see of people confusing those two roles and misunderstanding the overlap, because there is some overlap between them, but they're very distinct things. So you've got a caretaker or a service contractor or a resident manager, and their job is very much about the maintenance of the body corporate and the common property. The body corporate manager has much more of an administrative side of things. If you want to make it, if you want to put a really simplistic view in your mind, the body corporate manager, I'm not sure I should go down this path, but I'm going to do it, Frank. Body corporate manager, white collar, caretaker, blue collar. What do you reckon?
Yeah, and I sort of go off-site, on-site. I think the body corporate manager does a lot of the off-site administrative work, and the caretaker does the on-site administrative work, which is
actually better, I think.
Yeah, there you go. Rather than putting people in socio-demographic groups.
Yep.
But yeah, so there is that.
Snob.
Yep. Yeah. The next one, and Chris, I think this probably mightn't be something you should talk about.
No,
absolutely. There's a perception sometimes that the Commissioner's Office favours body corporate managers. Absolutely, we've had that come across our desk, particularly, I think, when acting for lot owners or individuals who are in disputes with their bodies corporate. And my experience is that is absolutely not the case. And if anything, I think, to a degree like lawyers are, they're held to a higher degree of accountability by the Commissioner's Office because they are professionals in an industry where they should know what they're doing. And I think the true test for that, and adjudicators are usually pretty loath to name people that aren't performing. And you know that they really haven't performed when you find people as strata managers, individually or as companies, that get named in adjudication decisions, because you know at that stage they have not done what they had to do, because the public naming and shaming is not a good thing. So, and they usually won't do that to anyone other than body corporate managers.
That's right, Frank. And you're absolutely spot on, Frank. When I was commissioner, we would expect much more of managers than pretty much anybody else. And we would engage with them that way. So, yeah, they were held to a high standard, and I think they still are. Next one, body corporate managers don't have a trust account or a fidelity fund. That's just how it is. They don't. So they're not real estate agents. They don't have a trust account, and there's not the fidelity fund there that you can claim against if there's some kind of loss. No, that's not the kind of regulation that body corporate managers have in Queensland.
yet.
Which leads very nicely to the next point, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? So, and for those of you that don't know, Chris is now a director of the Strata Community Association of Queensland, so a board member of that organisation, bringing a unique insight from his former government role. And one of the things that the SCA is pushing for is the licensing of strata managers. So I suppose we do have a new Attorney General as at last week. So how government looks at that now with a new AG in the chair, I suppose time will tell. And it's interesting, the licensing, it's sort of, it does bring an appearance of professionalism, although, and when you talk about trust accounts and things like that, financial malfeasance and all the rest of it, lawyers, we are regulated like you would not believe in terms of audits, compliance, practicing certificates, public execution if you do something that could be considered professional misconduct. And really, at the end of the day, I can lose my ability to practice if I do something that, by some standards, isn't necessarily that horrific. That's not the case yet for strata managers. So in theory, I could set up Higginson Strata Management tomorrow if I felt like it, not that I would, with no training, qualifications, experience or otherwise. So I think that licensing thing will be a big thing for the strata management industry as a whole, to the extent it actually gets there. And what that comes with in terms of trust accounts or otherwise, I suppose we don't know. But at this point in time, there's no licensing for strata managers.
That's right. Which leads also to the next point. There's no ombudsman for body corporate managers either. There's an ombudsman in Queensland, and their role is to oversee public sector service delivery. So it doesn't extend to body corporate managers. And certainly the Commissioner's Office is not an ombudsman for body corporate managers either. The SCA, of which Frank said, I happen to be a director now, does have a complaint handling mechanism against its members. But again, it's not an ombudsman. And Frank, the final point. Or our final myth.
Yeah, the body corporate manager should tell the body corporate they're doing the wrong thing. And this is the thing. To me, and there's a very fine line here, only lawyers can give legal advice in Queensland. Obviously, lots of body corporate managers understand a hell of a lot about the strata laws, and they will give their clients advice and guidance and the rest of it, but they can't stop a body corporate necessarily going down a wrong path. And they can't stop a headstrong committee from doing whatever that committee it is going to do. So they can certainly counsel them against it. They can certainly tell them, well, you shouldn't be doing this for these particular reasons, but they can't stop committees going rogue. And that's that same bus that body corporate managers sometimes go under with committees. And I know from a strata management perspective, it's not in their interest for body corporate managers to actually create disputes and create disharmony, because inevitably what happens at the end of that usually is there'll be a change of committee. And with that change of committee, if the strata manager has gone too heavily with the current committee, they're the first ones off the bus as well, and they lose the business.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to move into our next list, which is all of the stuff a body corporate manager actually does. So we spent a bit of time busting the myths. How about we actually clarify what a body corporate manager does by and large? This is a pretty lengthy list. We're going to go through it one by one. We might whip through it fairly quickly though, because I want to make sure we get to the best practice stuff at the end. So first of all, a body corporate manager does budget meetings. They meet with the committee to set a budget for the scheme. That's one of the big tasks that a body corporate manager usually has. Frank.
Absolutely, and they should guide their committee around what it is they've got to do to comply with the legislation. And that, I suppose, even in the context, we've got new modules starting on the 1st of March. And even Chris and I did a webinar this morning, and there's still a bunch of stuff in there that as we were going through it, that's interesting. Actually, how's that going to apply in practice? So strata managers will be guiding their clients around that.
Your turn, Frank.
Oh, that's the knowledge and wisdom bit that I was doing.
Sorry. Shows my knowledge and wisdom. Next one, me. Practical application of legislation. So it's not about interpreting or advising on legislation. It's saying section blah, blah says this. That's what it means in practice. Based upon my experience, that's what it means. That's actually the most helpful thing a body corporate manager can do in that situation. Frank.
Absolutely. And then statutory compliance. There's a newsletter to be written, and I don't know, someone told me a while back that a body corporate has probably got just around 100 pieces of legislation that it must comply with. So across the board, so you BCCM Act, obviously, Work Health and Safety Act, there's going to be the Fair Work Act if they've got employees, and a range of obviously other things that apply to ordinary businesses as well. a good strata manager make sure that their body's corporate are complying with all of those bits and pieces and are aware of the need to comply with them.
Which leads to the next one. The body corporate manager will liaise with contractors. So the committee makes a decision to do something, to have some work done. It typically falls to the body corporate manager to liaise with contractors, to send out the work order, to get them actually to do the work.
And of course, that includes then insurance. I mean, we've been, I suppose, banging on endlessly about insurance. Did our first double header up in North Queensland. Bodies corporates have to be insured. End of story. So that means that it's not a choice, they have to. So ideally, the body corporate manager sources competitive quotes for insurance, makes sure all of the bits and pieces are dealt with, serves it up to body corporate and said, here's the best one.
A body corporate manager arranges the meetings. So they send the notices. Sometimes they'll chair the meetings, sometimes, and they prepare and send out the minutes. That's actually a big part of the governance responsibilities of a body corporate.
I mean, I was at a general meeting on the Gold Coast on Tuesday, which could have been a contested one, and the body corporate manager there ran it beautifully in terms of my client thought we were going to be there for World War III, and it was a bunch of contentious motions on the agenda. It was all over in 40 minutes because she ran it really, really tightly and really, really well and didn't let anything get out of control. So a good body corporate manager is very time effective like that as well. And the other thing that they're doing all the time is you know, bodies corporate must have a statutory responsibility to keep body corporate records. So the body corporate manager will maintain all of that. And I think one of the real key things is also knowing what goes where, because, you know, in legal matters, there can be privileged material, and privileged material is material that people should not be able to get access to. So even making that differentiation of here's all the stuff that people can see, here's the stuff that they shouldn't see is a really important part of a body corporate manager's role.
That's right. One of the big parts of a body corporate manager's role is in relation to levies. So that is sending out the notices. It's about keeping the debtors list up to date. It's about, and then importantly, with the committee's consultation and direction, it's about initiating debt recovery, following up the levies. That's one of the most important things a body corporate manager will do.
Yeah, financial management 101, isn't it? The other one, next one then really, is putting bodies corporates in touch with the right people for what they need. Now, obviously, there's a whole industry that hangs off the back of strata managers, and we're one of them. We get lots of referrals from strata managers to give their bodies corporate advice. And from our perspective, obviously, the relationship we have with the body corporate managers is great. We create relationships with the committees through that. But if we didn't have that interface, it would be diabolical in terms of us having to educate clients who probably might not have dealt with a lawyer in a commercial context before about how to deal with it. You know, it's sort of they're collating the 7 committee members into a consolidated group and saying to us, Frank, Chris, this is what we want you to do, and then we do it. Us trying to herd those instructions would be a horribly expensive exercise with a potential bunch of unsophisticated committee members in a legal sense.
Absolutely. A body corporate manager also undertakes the necessary communication with caretakers and also tenants as well, and in some cases the real estate agent who has the relationship with the tenant. That's actually a really important role as well. I mean, imagine if you're a committee member and it was up to you to do all of that communication. That would take up a lot of time.
And it's, yeah, and timeframes. I mean, there's a whole bunch of statutory timeframes that apply to bodies corporates that tie back to the end of financial year, from asking for people to submit motions to nominations for committee to budget committee meetings to then running the body corporate throughout the year, issuing levies at the right time, and then for those additional things that come out of the box, like a commissioner's application, if that actually arrived. Are we making sure we're doing what we need to do? The body corporate managers will drive a committee around that and make sure that they're doing what they have to do.
A body corporate manager also can sometimes be a bit of a go-between between committee and owners who have disputes and vice versa. That doesn't mean they resolve the dispute or they're a mediator. It means that they can actually have some kind of middle ground there to receive, pass on, suggest, maybe even refer in some cases. Yep, that's an important role.
Absolutely. Another one, stay on top of everything. The reality is that, and one of the reasons we only do 2 areas of law, which is really body corporate law on one hand and management rights on the other, it's impossible to stay on top of everything these days. So a good body corporate manager will be on top of changes and will be informing their committees around what's coming. You know, and even in the new modules, there is some stuff at committee level that's going to make a massive difference to the day-to-day practice. that's going to need to be managed.
That's right. And one kind of final thing that body corporate managers do, and this is a bit of a specialised one, is that they do what's called Part 5 agreements and administration agreements. And that's for situations where the body corporate doesn't really have a functioning committee anymore, and the body corporate manager can step in under contract and do some roles there. So that's a pretty big list. And I invite everybody watching this today to ask themselves, do you reckon you could do all of that yourself, competently, thoroughly, whilst doing your day job and without getting paid to do it? Because that's effectively what you're saying if you're saying, I can manage our scheme ourselves. So if that's what you're saying, we can manage the body corporate ourselves. That means you're doing everything that Frank and I just listed off, and you can do that day in, day out as required. If the answer to that is yes, well done.
Very hardest.
You should be setting up a body corporate management firm, probably. And you probably don't need our help, frankly. But if the answer is no, and I suspect the answer is no for the vast majority of people, then I think that list is a really good reality check about a body corporate manager. You've got to be realistic about that relationship. And I've said this before many times, you don't have to like somebody. Somebody does not need to be your best friend in a body corporate environment, but you do need to have a modicum of professional respect for each other. That's the basis on which you move forward. All right, so I think it's fair to say, Frank, not every body corporate manager is perfect.
No,
just
people
not.
make mistakes. No, mistakes happen. That's the reality of it. Relationships sometimes get testy. We are perfect people living in an imperfect world. And as Chris has repeatedly said to me at seminars over the years, you're never going to legislate for human behaviour. That's it. So things do go wrong from time to time.
Well, okay, so then here's our step-by-step approach to resolving a problem that you think you might have with your body corporate manager. So step one, this sounds like a really obvious thing, but I think it's worth repeating. Clarify what your problem is. A rant or a series of emotive complaints, not necessarily the problem. Define it to a specific issue or set of issues. Right?
And then the next thing is, what do you actually want done with respect to that problem? What do you want? You know what I mean? And we have this from time to time. And Chris, I was thinking one of the other mythbusters we should have added at the start is, I can't believe I'm paying you $100 a week to do all this work. A lot of people think that the levies they pay go completely to the body corporate manager, as opposed to a small portion of it and everything else going everywhere else. But in terms of people's complaints, we get this a lot, and this isn't just body corporate managers across the board. People ringing us whinging. Okay, what do you want me to do?
Yep.
Where do you want to get to? Because my job is to try to help you get there, but it needs to start by, what is your solution?
Yep.
Where do you want to go? Because that ultimately is
If your answer is public flogging, then you need to revise. Number 3.
Or an apology. Yep. I want them to say sorry. That is not an actionable.
It happened all the time in the Commissioner's office, I can tell you that. Step 3, you need to take it up with your body corporate manager and ask them to respond. You don't just vent and complain, you take it up with them, you set out the issues, what's gone wrong, and what you think should happen, and you give a reasonable time frame for that to occur. Sounds really obvious, but that step is often missed, I find, in my experience.
And ideally, that's not necessarily swearing at them, using abusive language, emotive 4-page letters that just ramble on about whatever it is. If there's, you know what your issue is, you know what your solution is, get to that relatively quickly. And so inside strata manager land, there's really big organisations, like there's organisations that have in Queensland, let alone across the eastern seaboard, offices in various regional locations, sometimes more than one. So a single organisation might have 80 individual strata managers, and not all of those people are going to be perfect either. So versus the Higginson strata management who sets up tomorrow and Frank's the only guy. So if you've got an issue with your strata manager in one of those bigger organisations, and your first reach out hasn't got you a reaction, or the reaction you're looking for, or the answer you're looking for, then you've just got to go up the tree a little bit. So you find out who the branch manager is, who the state manager is, and go to them with the same way. Because the reality is that I think probably everyone's got lots going on. Body corporate managers are good at dealing with complaints because that's what they get a lot of, not necessarily about their own conduct, but conduct of committees, of lot owners, of tenants, of guests, of caretakers, or whatever it is. So handled the right way, they are usually, in my experience, fairly receptive to an appropriate approach, particularly at senior management level.
I think that's a really good point, Frank. And make sure you tell them that you've tried already. Yeah. Step 5, if still no response at that point, and if they're a member of the SCA, you can lodge a complaint with the SCA about that member. But again, you need to have done all of those preceding steps before you get to that point. Frank?
Yeah. Yep. And so what happens then if nothing happens? So I think then it's a matter of assessing whether what you're looking for is realistic to start with. So again, we'll go back to the public flogging. I want them sacked. I want to terminate them. Well, they might have a contract. And the other thing is, and I suppose it does depend to a degree on what your position in the body corporate is. So if you're on the committee and you're whinging, you've probably got a better chance of getting a response. If you're a newly arrived lot owner in a building of 300 units and the committee strongly supportive of the body corporate manager, your complaint might not necessarily get the same traction. So at that stage, you've got to look at what else it is that you're trying to do, and is there another way to get that particular outcome? So we're not going to go into specifics, I suppose, but you have committee meetings. Lot owners now have the ability come 1 March to lodge requests of committees to make decisions. You've also got a chance once a year to ask owners in general meeting to make decisions. So if your particular gripe, assuming it's actually directed at the body corporate manager as opposed to the body corporate as a whole, who knows? Maybe there's an opportunity there to do something.
I think so. The next step, if you think that you really can't proceed, so you've tried all of those points and you're still stuck, you may need to seek legal advice about the contract, because it is a contract at that point. You can't just say, well, to hell with it, we won't pay anymore. No, that's not the case. You are bound to a contract. So you've gone through all of those steps, you've exhausted those options, you haven't gotten anywhere, you really have gotten as far as you can go. Seek legal advice. And then Frank, finally.
Well, and here's another myth, I suppose. All body corporate managers are on the take. I don't know how many times we've heard that. Very, 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 very rare for it to happen. Probably even less rare, dare I say it, than solicitors in the legal profession from time to time, given the number of lawyers that get struck off for dealing with trust accounts inappropriately. But it does. And so if there is genuine concerns about theft, that's a matter for the police. That's the reality of it. And I know the example, as horrible as it is, we had one of our account staff at one stage take 30 grand from our general account over 2 months without us knowing. It wasn't going to stay hidden for all that long. And we went to the police with that as well. But you've got to go to them, not with, we think this has happened. It's, this is happened. Here is the evidence. Because the police won't go and do an investigation on their own, particularly if it's this sort of nebulous statements and accusations. You produce something that's rock solid, evidence, researched, factual, then you are a far better chance, as much as I think it's probably highly unlikely that you'll get that in terms of strata managers. I
was just going to say, Frank, I can't stress enough that that is absolutely the exception rather than the rule.
Couldn't agree more.
Yep. When I was commissioner, the instances of that happening were so rare. So rare.
But it's worth busting that myth, isn't it? Because that gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
And invariably it's false.
So, I mean, that to some people listening might seem like a bit of a convoluted way to go about it, but really when you follow through all of those steps, you will find at some point that you've narrowed it down, say, oh, body corporate manager's terrible, body corporate manager's terrible. What is actually so terrible in this situation? I would predict that in probably 95% of cases, it's actually got nothing to do with the body corporate manager. Whatever your issue is, whatever your problem is at that point in time, it's probably got nothing to do with the body corporate manager, but it's got everything to do with something else, which is going on at the body corporate.
Not the least of which will be the committee giving them instructions in a certain way.
Yep. And look, it happens. It happens. I have seen instances of committees instructing body corporate managers to do things that they patently knew were wrong, but they did it. They told them to do it, and the body corporate manager was compelled to do it because they are acting under instruction.
Absolutely.
So it's a tough role. I've said it many times, I would never be a body corporate manager. And it's just too hard. It's too hard. And lest anybody think that we are pro body corporate managers, well, of course we are, because they're professional and they have a really hard job. but they also make our job a lot easier, frankly. So yes, of course we're pro body corporate managers. What else would we be? I just want to address those comments there from John. John, thank you for watching. A couple of questions about your OCM, which suggests to me, John, that you're probably not in Queensland. In New South Wales, probably should have said at the start, every state and territory takes a different approach to body corporate managers in terms of legislation, in terms of license. Some states license, some states do not. Some states have trust accounts, some states do not. So John, I think if you're not in Queensland, if you're not in the Queensland strata, you might want to seek out the particular agency in the state that you're in. Otherwise, it sounds very much like a contractual issue that you're talking about there, John. And you might want to drop us a line if you're after some further info. Gosh, we've come to the end. That flew by.
As always.
As always. Thank you, Frank. I would be interested to see if the same kind of engagement and interaction with this one occurs as the first one on body corporate managers. Because if it does, that tells us that we probably need a part 3. And our part 3, I think, Frank, might actually see us having a real life body corporate manager talking. Yes, they're out there. We might see which one is prepared to walk the plank with us on a future webinar. I think that would be good. Comment there from Stephen. I do hope you'll do a webinar on caretakers. We have already, Stephen, but we will certainly be doing a part 2. With that, everybody, thank you. Don't forget to tune in next week. We have all of the webinars scheduled for the rest of the year. Next week, an always favourite topic, unruly guests, particularly around schoolies and what you can do about it. Yes, schoolies is still happening in some form or another. Stay tuned for that one. Drop us a line if you've got any questions, info@hineslegal.com.au. Frank, it was a pleasure.
Always. Thanks. Good to be back.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
See you, everyone. Bye.